Hello everyone, this is part 9 of What If Deku Was the Chainsaw Man, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Resplendent as they are aureate, eyes layered by the 7 circles of hell gaze through a polycarbonate and aluminum oxynitride window. The Hero Public Safety Commission installed this particular glass after a mishap with their ex-agent infamously known as Lady Nagant. Even her unique ammunition lacks the firepower to crack this bulletproof window, let alone pierce through or shatter it. Golden orbs as reflectant as the sun shimmering in the sky take in the cityscape view of Japan. None of the skyscrapers reach the heights of the HPSC's ivory tower. From the top level of the headquarters, nothing appears capable of reaching it. Wooden doors adopting French architecture lurch open, barely making a noise as they do. Those aforementioned golden eyes of extravagance continue staring forward, but now look at the window's reflection to see who enters the boardroom. Kigo Takumi, otherwise known as Hawks, warily steps into the office space. He glances left and right to see executives and other big wigs dressed in business suits. Notable faces occupy cush chairs at a long table, one of which is the newly appointed vice president, Yokumaru Mera. Hawks takes his seat next to him. A moment of silence passes, even as the French doors slowly swing themselves shut. I'm glad you could make it, Takumi-tan. I was worried the traffic from the sports festival would have kept you. The owner of Golden Circled Eyes speaks so softly that the quiet nature of the room somehow stays. It begins to become an eerie deaf tone, whispering in the ears of Hawks. The hero swallows the breath that he realizes he's been holding before replying. That's usually not a problem I have while flying first class. His joke falls flat even after he furrows his wings for emphasis. The rough landing makes him instinctively wince. The room's silence is still damning. The woman at the head of the table smiles slightly before turning away from the window and facing the board. The braided part of her luxurious red locks sway with the movement, but her bangs remain still at eye level, a judgmental stare scaling the weight of her golden gaze. She wears a form-fitting black dress that sets her apart from the others. As though just now noticing the difference between herself and everyone else present, her head tilts to one side. Shall we begin? She lacks the proper punctuation to make the words she speaks an actual question. Hawks understands that's because what the director of the HPSC says tends to be an order. Any sort of democracy the hero divisions had became null and void when she took on her position. This woman took complete control of the entire department and everyone here knows better than to challenge her authority. So, Hawks nods along with everybody else present in the room. When the director tilts her head to the opposite side of her lean, indicating that she's waiting for a verbal response, he speaks like everyone else as well. He swallows and says the same as the others. Yes, Miss Makima. Makima settles into her seat at the head of the table, satisfied with the attentive response of her fellow chairman. A precisional method of sliding the manila folders the way a croupier deals cards comes with smooth swipes of her hands. When Hawks gets the remaining file slid to him, he wastes no time flipping it open to read its contents. He feels Makima's eyes on him while his take in what's been presented. The subject matter for today's meeting. She pauses as though for dramatic effect. But Hawks already knows what she's about to say. If the photo included in his information packet wasn't enough, he's able to recognize the name on the handout after this year's sports festival. It's expected, but the hero still feels a pang in his chest when he hears Makima confirm it, is whether or not Izuku Midoriya should be ordained into the HPSC initiative. One of the board members, Hawks didn't bother to remember his name, feigns a cough to clear his throat before using that same hand to signal for everyone's attention. He's one of the company's elders if his canyon-deep wrinkles are any indication. Whatever hair he has left on his head is as dull a gray as his business suit attire. It's quite clear this boy has a quirk that's not so glamorous. Regardless of our influence, there's no plausible future where he'd be placed in the spotlight. The man glances about as he makes his point but comes across as unsure of himself by doing so. At one point, he even meets Hawks' gaze. That's when Hawks realizes the man is likely just avoiding making eye contact with Makima. A second businessman, much younger than his senior, tries to be more confident with his input. Tell that to hero influences like Ryukyu or Gang Orca. Civilian and fan appeal have been in favor of scarier looking heroes lately. Times are changing, the next generation liking gruff types like Endeavor more and more each day. The last part seemed below the belt enough to make the older businessman hunch over with embarrassment, but everyone in the room otherwise agrees with that sentiment by nodding and murmuring with approval. Until Makima raises a hand to hush them, the bare palm she presents much more evocative than words. Both notions have already been regarded during this selection. She makes most of the board stir in their seats when they realize they have to squirm for something else to comment on, rather than open up the table to discussion. I would like for us to consider what has already been determined. Nobody makes a move. Not one person dares lift a finger or raise a hand. The only movement of mouths is the clenching of jaws. Makima waits nonetheless before continuing. Unlike our much adored number 2 who's currently present with us, Hawks feels his own cheekbones tightening with the rest of his body tensing upon being singled out. My goal is not to glorify Midoriya as the next big hero. Rather, while taking steps as not to repeat former mistakes, I would like for us to focus our efforts on making Midoriya the next Lady Nagant. Makima's proposition muzzles the board, leaving them more speechless than they were before. She smiles when there's no verbal opposition. Then she clasps her hands together, like a true exec would. It's not typical for a gun to be associated with a hero, much less a chainsaw. However, an operative who works outside of the spotlight and in the shadows as an assassin, Midoriya would make an excellent attack dog. Hawks struggles to fight against how hard his teeth clamp together. He wants to say something in Midoriya's defense, make an effort, do anything he can to somehow divert this fate. He needs to. But there's a pressure weighing him down that keeps his mouth closed. The heaviness is so much that he bites his tongue. The pain that suddenly flares up makes his jaw untighten for the slightest of seconds. It's enough. Like the words that wish to escape his mouth, so does his throbbing tongue. He's just a boy. Hawks blurts out what he wants to say while he can. Which earns him a bunch of looks. But he doesn't care. Because now that the attention is on him and not Makima, he can finally speak. Midoriya is only a child, not an animal, not a wild dog. But Makima has an answer for that, not upon closer examination, and all eyes are drawn back to her. During his evaluation, how he handles his quirk was inspected. Several reports acquired from UA helped us determine just what kind of animal Midoriya is, and a wild dog is as accurate a description as any. Makima procures a manila folder that wasn't previously made available and unveils the file's contents herself to support her statement. Hawks hardens his stare when he sees pictures of mutilated and mangled bodies. These are a result of Izuku Midoriya. She flips from one photo to the next in order to provide the board with a close-up shot of the damage. We didn't need to perform autopsies to figure out what caused this kind of injury. Hawks has seen the difference between the clean cut a blade makes and the jagged curve a set of claws can leave behind. Whatever this is, a misshapen carving with no pattern, leads his imagination to chainsaws. These were villains participating in the USJ incident, but even so, you can only imagine the repercussions Mr. Midoriya would have faced had this gotten out to the general public. Makima closes the folder when several board members gag at the images. The HPSC struck a deal with UA's principal to avoid mass hysteria in favor of Midoriya's hero record remaining unhindered. It is now time to capitalize on this arrangement. Hawks forgets to fold his wings when he leans back, the rough edge of his chair applying pressure to his spine as it straightens. He blinks back the shock of what he just heard, realizing that things only make more sense now, that this shouldn't come as a surprise. Makima had her eyes on Midoriya since before even the sports festival. She had just been waiting for an opportune moment to make her move. He can imagine the woman playing UA's principal in a match of chess, Nezu losing a very valuable piece off the board now. Unless, the HPSC hadn't even had to resort to blackmail, and Nezu proved his nature more of a rat than just his appearance. Hawks shakes his head, trying to stay ever the optimist, no matter how difficult. In that case, we should avoid applying any more attention to him than necessary, no. Hawks resists the urge to scratch the itch of his feathers rustling when Makima fixes him with an intense stare. He instead drags his nails against his scalp, feigning to be picking through his hair. I mean, an internship with the number 2 hero would only be shining the spotlight on him. He tries to rationalize the situation in his favor but can't help but doubt himself under the director's glare. Unlike your unfortunate Paideia, Midoriya would benefit from the tutelage of his predecessor. The rings illuminated by the luminescence of Mikima's eyes focus like the crosshair of a sniper's scope. Would I be mistaken under that assumption? Hawks shivers like a newborn chick. No, ma'am. He wonders whether or not Lady Nagant would have had an influence on him had he been trained by her. Perhaps he'll be able to help Midoriya in a way that she would have been unable to help him. Maybe, still being ever the optimist, this will be a good thing. Yokumaru Mera raises his head, appearing almost as though he had dozed off during the meeting. Considering how low the bags beneath his eyes are hanging, he may very well have. We can always consider the alternative. He removes a paperclip from the collective sheet of papers in front of him before pushing a particular page to the table's center. We might want to think about taking a direct approach as we had done with Takumi. After all, Hawks resists the urge to react to his own name and origin being mentioned. But when he leans forward to see why Mera never closed his file on Midoriya like the others had, he understands the correlation. Mikima responds with a single nod first, a silent affirmation. Mr. Midoriya recently lost his mother to illness. With his father's residence in America and Midoriya's pursuit of education being here in Japan, we may have yet another opportunity to take action as Mera suggested. She compares the shared center document with her own copy before nodding a second time. This is certainly an avenue we'll explore. However, I would still like for Takumi to offer Midoriya with an internship. Consider it a form of insurance. Hawks mumbles his agreement with the rest of the board. The motion carried. He had hoped to spare Midoriya. Another student of UA showed signs of a bird-related quirk. He had planned to go with the unassuming angle of birds flocking together. But he knows that suggestion would be overruled now. Even if he were to request a dual internship, Mikima would make Midoriya his priority. All he can do now is hope the kid is well rested and ready for what's about to come. Mikima turns her back on the board, her dark dress a shadow that trails behind her. Clouds have gathered overhead, blotting out the sun. The city appears to be asleep. Buildings hang low and high, a hospital at the epicenter. Windows glisten but don't reflect what the world holds in store. All anyone can do now is wait for the wake. Izuku sheds his sleep slowly. Before he opens his eyes, he first registers what he hears. What sounds like somebody scratching at the door to be let in has him turning his head to see who it could be. The boy's eyelids fully flutter open when he sees Kyoka Jiru. The girl is sitting next to him. The noise he heard is her pencil scratches in a notebook. Izuku gradually recalls his location and figures out why his classmate would be present at his bedside. The final match of the sports festival had put him in the recovery ward. She must have been worried. Still slightly sluggish, he barely raises his hand to wave before it flops back down. Hey, but he does enough to get the girl's attention. She jumps at the sound of his voice, clearly having not expected him to wake up yet. Midoriya, she snaps the notebook she's holding shut. The pencil she had been using drops before bouncing against the hard tiled floor and rolling away. Ah, crap. She motions to go after it before deciding not to. I'll call for a nurse or. No, not yet, please. Izuku strains to sit up in an effort to stop her but fails miserably. Kyoka moves back to his side, if not for the sake of his request then out of concern for his weakened state. I just woke up and I'm not up to it yet. He sinks back into the cushioning of the bed and pillow as he gives in to his body's protests against moving. Okay, fine. Kyoka hesitates but ultimately gives in when she sees how big and round his pleading eyes are. He's like a damn puppy in one of those rescued animal commercials. Recovery girl did say her quirk without a blood transfusion this time would do a number on you. She sits back down and prepares to fill him in on what he missed. But Izuku musters up the strength to shrug it off, showing her that he doesn't care to know much more. She recalls the moment before his matches and figures she'd feel the same way if her mom died. The boy's eyes drift downwards. For a moment, she thinks he's dozing off again or becoming lost in thought. But then she realizes his gaze is on her lap and what she's holding in it. What were you working on? Kyoka shrinks in on herself, wanting to hide when she feels her face heating up. Stupid. How could you just ask me that? She mutters to herself her complaints since she can't actually take it out on him during his time of distress. I was. Her voice catches in her throat. Something that usually only happens when her parents try to make her sing in public. If she could give some of Izuku the blood that's rushing to her face, she would. Kyoka slaps her cheeks before mumbling, I was writing you a song. She dares to glance over at the boy in order to gauge his reaction. She's shocked to see his eyes could somehow get even bigger and brighter. Wow, really? That's amazing, Jiro. Maybe I could sing it some time. He only realizes what he said after the words leave his mouth. It's his turn to flush completely red, all of whatever blood is left in his body making itself visible. Dummy. Kyoka resists the urge to stab him with her earjacks. She squirms in her seat while trying to avoid eye contact, no longer brave enough to look at him. Trying to change the subject to save himself from embarrassment, Izuku clears his throat before asking, hey. Didn't your original hero costume come with support gear? Kyoka looks back at him, confused. Yeah. Why? Her jacks lower from the poised position to untangle themselves and hang loosely. Izuku smiles, it was a katana, right? He closes and reopens his hands into fists before explaining himself. Kaken said all I do is swing my chainsaws around. The loss of his match makes his smile wilt a bit. Maybe you could, I dunno, teach me some techniques. Just a few to get some kinda style established, but his eyes remain bright and hopeful. Kyoka has to look away again. Sure, she tries to play it cool and not get flustered this time. I mean, I don't know a lot, that's why I decided to ditch it. But I think I know enough that I might be able to help you with that. Her nervous tick of twirling an ear jack on her finger makes a return. I didn't think anyone would have noticed that about me. I did. Izuku's response makes the jack coil and tighten like a tuned guitar string. But his follow-up makes her heart thump heavy in her chest like a drum. You're a girl that's hard not to notice. Before the two can continue tormenting one another with their accidental flirting, the room's door slides open. I knew I heard voices. Midori, you're awake. A familiar Pinkett hurls herself onto the boy's bed to hug him. Followed by a pointy-haired redhead with a signature shark-toothed grin. Good to see you're up, Kirishima chuckles while helping Kyoka pry Mina off the poor bedridden boy. We were getting worried for a while there. Quick, I heard that eating your get-well flowers can make you feel better. Mina breaks loose to lunge at a vase full of tulips placed by Izuku's bedside. There's no stopping the Pinkett as she hysterically tries to force-feed the boy. Yes, I heard this too. A voice contrastingly calm compared to the room full of yelling turns everyone's attention to the doorway. Another fellow hero student stands there awkwardly, his heterochromic gaze not revealing much emotion. Todoroki, you too. Izuku cries out with both shock and despair. That's the only opportunity Mina needs to shove the tulips down his throat. He gags as the flowers get crammed into his open mouth and he's forced to swallow or suffocate. What is all this ruckus? Izuku's only saving grace is the arrival of Recovery Girl. The nurse wallops each of them on the head with her cane to stop the rough housing. Don't you know bed rest is the most important thing for a patient? Rest. Get out if you're not going to contribute. Sorry, Midori. Mina rubs the throbbing spot on her head where she was whacked before retreating through the exit. Yeah, bro. Get better soon. Kirishima mirrors the girl that he came with before dragging Todoroki with him. Kyoka sighs as she collects her things to go with them. But Izuku stops her when he sees her grab her notebook. Remember. I wanna hear that song when it's finished. She pauses, surprised that he's still so insistent. Then shakes her head. You'd have to be a magician to pull that off. Her soft chuckle makes the boy laugh along. Until he chokes. Kyoka looks down at him, her face scrunching up with concern as he coughs. She almost expects him to spit up blood again. But instead, something else comes out of his mouth. Landing right in the palm of his hand, are the white petals of the tulips that he swallowed. Though covered with saliva from hacking them up, Izuku presents her with flowers. Tada, he flashes her a cheesy grin. That's it. His health and recovery girl be damned. Kyoka jabs him with her ear jacks, dummy. It's a huddle as indiscriminately organized as the droplets descending from a lightless sky. Everyone adorns black attire, the dim day reflecting on their faces despite the lack of sunbeams. Rain rolls off headstones while simultaneously pelting umbrellas. Slick grass sways with a boy's mutually green curls. A breeze stirs something up in him. The tremble of his hand that slides through his umbrella's handle is as loose as his posture. His breath shakes. Everything does. His whole world is shaken. Still shaking. Izuku had gotten so used to the warmth of Pokita's presence in his heart, that the bitter bite of his mother's cold absence leaves him in an ever-constant agony. The Bakugos are present. Kaken, Katsuki, he catches his childhood frenemy's gaze every so often. A few of his mother's co-workers bow their heads to show their sympathy. Everyone at Inko Midoriya's grave has some degree of condolences to give. Izuku takes none of them. He shudders when his mother's warm embrace is replaced by another chilling breeze. The air hugs him until he suffocates. It's difficult to breathe life into his lungs while standing in a place so devoid of any. Death occupies every headstone as far as the eye can see. Heaven or hell, he feels like the devil to have cheated what should have eventually been his fate too. He'd had time to cry. He'd had time to process her passing. Yet, he still wasn't prepared to see his mother lowered into the ground. Only after dirt covered her casket did her death seem permanent. Pokita never received a proper burial. To an extent, it is almost as though Pokita never left. Izuku raises a hand to his chest, feeling his heartbeat that's only possible because of the Wonder Dog. This is a funeral. This is someone leaving for good. Izuku realizes he'll never see his mom ever again. They'll never speak to one another in a fated reunion like he had with Pokita. She's gone. Forever. Izuku stays there despite that fact. Even after all the other attendees have left, he remains rooted to the ground akin to the tree that shadows him with darkened leaves. His eyes lift past the cemetery and take to the sky. Clouds blend with the moisture in the air, creating a sheet that covers any speck of light a star might make. The hand covering his heart stretches out towards it, reaching for a doorknob to heaven's door. Just when he feels like he might be able to open it by some chance or miracle, he hears the wet squelch of someone's shoe sinking into the mud of damp pastures. The boy settles his sights back down on the land. Across from him, he's shocked to see a familiar face from his class. Though the fellow hero in training's glasses are fogged, equally square-shaped eyes meet Izuku's. Ida. Izuku breathes out a gust of condensation that seemingly takes the rest of his breath away as he chokes on his next words. What are you doing here? Ida's lips stay set in a solid straight line as grim as his posture and demeanor. Instead of speaking, he slowly gestures with a thumb over his shoulder at another burial taking place. When Izuku notices a resemblance in the features of the attendants there with Ida's, he understands. Ida glances down at the headstone in between them, the comprehension of the other boy's presence mutual. Izuku's grip on his umbrella handle tightens, then loosens. He closes the distance between them by taking the first steps away from his mother's resting place. Mind if I join you? Izuku meets his classmate's gaze again. Any light in their eyes have been dimmed, each stare reduced to a vacant expression. Yet, there's an unspoken communication. Ida gives his peer a solemn nod before gesturing in the direction of the funeral. Izuku joins his classmate for a second eulogy. This one is for the pro-hero Ingenium, Tensei Ida, Tenya's older brother. Tenya's sibling had been murdered during the sports festival, hence Tenya's strange behavior. Izuku had been so preoccupied with his own mess of issues that he failed to notice anything was wrong until now. The storm overhead continues to brew. Rain pours harder. It's a sad send-off. Can we not speak of this to the others? I'd rather my personal matters stay private. Ida fixes Izuku with a sidelong stare. Wind whips a spray of particles between them. Izuku returns the other boy's look. He holds the gaze before nodding. It's not something you really want to talk about with anybody. His eyelids lull and he has to close them despite their eye contact breaking by doing so. I understand. Ida's stiff posture softens. Yes, I suppose you would. He takes that as an opportunity to remove and defog his glasses before putting them back on to look at Izuku more clearly. Thank you. Izuku hums in response before the horn of a waiting limo beckons for Ida. The boy turns, signaling to them to wait a while longer. Ida sighs as he gives pause to his parting words, and Midoriya. I'm sorry for your loss. Izuku shifts so that he's turned too, prepared to go the other way, back in the direction of his mother's headstone. Take care, Ida. Rain falls in a collective cascading flow that transfers into the movement of running water in the flooded terrain. It's become such a monsoon that Izuku doesn't bother with his umbrella anymore. Drenched head to toe as his shoes sink into the slush of muddy land, he moves forward. This way, nobody can tell the difference between the storm and his eyes. Flashes of anger illuminated by sparks of lightning within the well of tears stare ahead. He sways and stumbles but carries himself home. When Izuku reaches his house, he finds the front door already unlocked. He stands in the middle of the frame. A blue luminescence of the downpour behind him dimly lights the dark hallway that leads inside. There's a waft of something scented. A billow of steam warmer than the fog of the air outside. The tea that his mother keeps in the cabinets above the oven has been brewed. Izuku steps into the house and rounds the corner, not caring that he tracks filth along the carpeted floor. I let myself in. A woman sits with one leg crossed over the other while clasping a cup of tea with each of her hands. She's not his mother. Her crimson-colored hair is braided and long, unlike his mom's emerald bun that she kept short. I hope you don't mind. The mysterious lady takes a sip from her drink as she gauges Izuku in response to his staring. After overcoming his initial stupor and surprise, Izuku instinctually reaches for the string attached to his sternum. Maybe I do, he growls as a warning to the stranger while narrowing his eyes to glare. Relax, Mr. Midoriya, I'm from the Hero Public Safety Commission. The woman sets her cup down in order to procure a badge of proof. Izuku's already squinted eyes read the license and identify her as Director Makima, making them widen when he's finished. I'm not here to harm you. Though it is a good sign to see you're the type of person who's prepared to take action if need be. Izuku lets his hand fall away from the ripcord on his chest. Exasperated, his whole body slouches and he can't help but sigh. Sorry, you just happened to catch me on a bad day. The apology is just short of coming out as a groan, but he sees that the HPSC director is already nodding along as though she understands. Your mother, Makima, has a stoic tone and expression more devoid of emotion than Ida had acted, but she still says what Izuku has come to expect from people lately: I'm sorry for your loss. Everybody is. He tries not to sound bitter about it by telling himself it's not her fault, not like you were the one that made me her sick. Makima tilts her head down, chin aimed towards the ground. From this angle, the subtle twitch of her mouth is lesser noticed. It's a small smile that doesn't involve much movement of the lips, but the uplift still contains the telltale facial shifts that indicate a similar expression. Then there's the look in her eyes that bore into Izuku's. Her stare throws the boy off balance, her gaze an optical illusion composed of glowing rings tunneling towards him like a hypnotic spiral. It's a straight drop into hell through every ring. Izuku breaks her hold by blinking before swallowing to find his voice within the dazed demeanor he's unfamiliar with. Care to tell me why you broke into my house unannounced? Makima gestures for him to sit and he does. After your performance at the sports festival, the HPSC thought it best to make a proposition. She reclaims her tea to resume taking small sips from it. An internship? Izuku asks. Not quite. Makima's smile is a tad more defined this time but vanishes just as quickly. This is a long-term trainee program under similar pretenses though. Her index finger taps the rim of her teacup as she thinks of a better way to phrase it. Think of it as job security. Izuku runs a hand through his hair, feeling how slick it's become from the rain. I'm sorry, it might just be because I've had a long day, but I don't really follow. His hand slides down to pinch some of his forehead. He's thinking. After the unfortunate passing of your mother, your place of residence and other provisions such as payment for your curriculum fall into question. The HPSC is fully prepared to provide you with the hospitality you require to continue your academic studies while pursuing an alternative path to your future as a hero. Makima elaborates further when she sees him having trouble with his thoughts on the matter. Oh, I don't know, but Izuku still stays skeptical. If I'm gonna graduate from UA, I don't think I'll have any troubles. He scratches his head as though any other idea to consider is just an annoying itch. Besides, my father has been providing financially despite working overseas. When Izuku looks back in the direction of Makima, he sees that she's not stopped staring at him. I see, she finishes her cup of tea while still maintaining the hold. It's like the woman swallowed all of the room's warmth when a shiver runs up the boy's spine. Then, Makima leans forward. Her tone becomes hushed as she asks, have you considered a course of action should something happen to him? Precipitation excretes fog from Izuku's mouth as he breathes out. The boy's blood runs cold. You've already lost one parent, Makima says it matter-of-factly. She may as well. It is a fact. What she says next, however, is spoken just as casually. It's not out of the realm of possibility to lose another. Izuku's teeth clack together, he stops them from chattering as his skin is nipped by a chilling sensation. His hair prickles, standing on end. What are you trying to say? He leans forward to match Makima's position, but his height keeps him bent lower than her. Looking up at her, he can imagine a false halo above her angelic face, the sinister stare he can't help but be drawn into belonging to that of a true devil's nature. As I stated earlier, my organization can provide you with all your needs, including medical compensation for your remaining family. She props her elbows on her knees to make a sturdy hand table for her chin to rest on while presenting him with the same deal that she tried to strike before. He half expects the woman to hand him a pen to sign a contract with. Medical compensation. Izuku leans back enough to straighten his posture as he blinks back his disbelief. The attempt at blackmail aside, he feels rage well up inside of him. Where was your medical compensation when I needed you for my mother's treatment? He forces himself to his feet so that he stands over her. My father's fine. Izuku snaps at the woman so angrily that his teeth gnash together and saliva flies out of his mouth. My mom's not. Had she come to him sooner with this proposition, it just may have worked. He'd have jumped at the opportunity to provide for his mom. To save her. You're too late, but that chance is gone, and so the offer isn't worth considering to him. His frown flinches as his fury fades into sorrow. It really was a bad day for the HPSC director to approach him with this. Makima raises her head with a hum, bringing Izuku's attention back to her. She unfolds her arms first, then uncrosses her legs. That's a shame. The boy takes a step back when she suddenly stands up. Even without heels, she's taller than him. A moment of silence passes. The only sound filling the room is the ambience of the harsh storm that pounds to be let in. Izuku can't help but back away another step when Makima makes a move to reach behind her. When he sees that she's only grabbing her overcoat from the headrest of the couch, he allows himself to relax only the slightest bit. She slides her arms into the sleeves before pulling something out of the coat's left pocket. The offer still stands should you change your mind. Izuku takes a second to realize she's offering him her business card. The boy nods and takes it, at least as a sign of respect. His fingers brush against something attached to the back of the small white rectangle. Startled, Izuku nearly drops the card. When he flips it over, however, he sees that it's simply a Chupa Chups lollipop. It's a shade of red close to brown. Cola flavored. Izuku glances back up to see Makima not trying to hide her smile this time. He swallows, somehow already tasting the soda flavor in his mouth despite how dry it is. Appreciate the sentiment. He shoves the lollipop into his own pocket before stepping aside so that she can leave. After the HPSC director exits, Izuku returns to the couch where he collapses. He suddenly feels exhausted. A majority of the conversations he's had today have been draining, but that one had been the worst by far. He's about to close his eyes so that he can just sleep it off when he notices the collection of papers on the coffee table in front of him. UA's logo is stamped at the top of each page. He forces back a yawn by turning it into a sigh. Even though Aizawa had given him the day off to mourn and tend to his mother's funeral, he's still got the day's worth of coursework to do. Izuku sifts through them, seeing that his assignment pertains to internship requests he received after his performance at the sports festival. Seeing some of the offers that he received from pro heroes he idolized during his childhood, he feels more content with his decision to deny Makima's offer. One of the names piques his interest in particular. He digs his hand into his pocket, hoping to have a pencil on him. Instead, he finds the lollipop. He shrugs. May as well. The candy is a treat worth having to celebrate. Izuku slides the Chupa Chup into his mouth as he grabs a pen from his other pocket to circle his chosen internship offer. A squiggly oval wraps around Izuku's selected agency, Kigo Takumi, the number 2 hero known as Hawks. Feet cross a concrete landing without ever treading over the yellow paint line that separates them from crumpled ticket stubs and food wrappers spotting a gravel rail bed. Other pairs of legs pass by in the other direction, following map routes that post the train schedule on nearly every wall. Constant motion carries a flow of people throughout the station, men and women walking up or down escalators to pass through turnstiles. Red sneakers scrape to a sudden halt, followed by the collective shoe scratches of others. Class 1A gathers at a track with their teacher, standing to the side where commuting pedestrians won't be obstructed by the crowded presence. You've all brought your costumes, I see. Good. Don't drop or leave them behind when you get on and off your trains. Aizawa looks over the group of teens to perform a mental head count. Izuku's grip on the handle of his UA uniform's briefcase tightens. When Aizawa sees his entire class is present and accounted for, he allows himself to close his tired and dry eyes for a second of rest. He absent-mindedly scratches at the stitches sewing his left cheek together before reopening his eyes. I expect all of you to be on your best behavior. Now get going. A commotion of conversation breaks out amongst the group as they begin to split off in duos and trios. You headed to Kyushu. I think it's that way. Ashido pairs off with Uraraka. Sero says something to Kaminari while they walk in the other direction. Only a few remain with Aizawa on that particular platform once everyone takes their respective paths. Kirishima, Bakugo, and Jiro idle with Izuku while they wait for their train. Jiro toys with a near jack, twisting it on one of her fingers. Izuku glances in her direction, catching her returning the stare. They each look away as quickly as their eyes met, blushing. So, have you decided on a hero name yet? The girl shyly tries to salvage the situation before it can turn awkward. Not yet, Izuku chuckles, but the humor fades as he responds, I've been a little too distracted to come up with anything. He forces down an instinctive wince when he realizes he made things uncomfortable again. Wanting to prevent a weird silence, he asks, any suggestions? Before Jiro can get out a response, Kirishima suddenly wraps his arm around Izuku's shoulders, pulling him in close for a side hug. How about taking a page from Bakubro's book and calling yourself Lord Chainsaw? He flashes his patented shark-toothed grin that seems more aimed towards Bakubro than Izuku. Izuku exchanges a look with his childhood friend, raising an eyebrow. TCH, but the blonde rolls his eyes in response before closing them to avoid having to elaborate, don't go copying me. I doubt that's the last thing he'd wanna do. Jiro's deadpan response doesn't let the blonde disregard them for too long though. Oi. Bakugo's eyes snap back open as he turns to face them. He opens his mouth, ready to retort, but stops when he makes eye contact with Izuku. There's a strange exchange of brief staring that takes Izuku by surprise. Even more startling to him is when Bakugo scoffs, only saying, whatever, before letting it go. Izuku clears his throat, recovering from the odd exchange. I'll probably just go with something simple, like, I dunno. Chainsaw Man, he shrugs as he throws out the first idea that comes to him. Kirishima jerks Izuku with his recoil, still not unlatching his arm from the other boy's shoulders. That's it. Not to be a hater, but that's kinda basic. The fanged redhead's pointed grin falters but remains intact to stay polite as he shares his opinion on the name. Jiro comes to Izuku's rescue, prying Kirishima off him in order to separate the two and share her own thoughts. Maybe, but it still sounds hardcore. She steps in between them to also prevent potential future invasion of space. Blinking back his shock, Izuku has to do a double take. You really like it? Hearing him sound so hopeful, Jiro smirks, unable to help herself from teasing him. It's not that metal, but someone had to back you up. Heaven knows Bakugo wasn't going to. She feels proud of herself when she's able to simultaneously take another shot at the explosive member of the bunch. But Bakugo doesn't restrain himself from firing back this time. You're one to talk? Ears. It's his turn to smirk as he points out, earphone jack isn't all that original either. Oi. Jiro's smile shifts to a scowl. Izuku has to place himself in her path to Bakugo when he catches her glowering at the blonde. Before things can escalate to the next level, a new voice chimes in. Don't tell me I just walked into an argument. All heads turn to see who. Much to the group's surprise, Hitoshi Shinso approaches them. It's too early in the morning for that. He appears as he had on the day of the sports festival. Eyebags compliment his bedhead as he cracks open a coffee can. Shinso, Izuku can't contain his shock when he recognizes the boy he had fought. You're late. The only person who doesn't show a shred of surprise is Aizawa. The teacher appears as tired as the newcomer, their resemblance uncanny when they stand side by side. Shinso takes a sip of his coffee before his excuse comes out as a low drawl, I made a stop at the vending machine. Bakugo flicks his gaze from person to person, patience growing thin as he waits for them to ask the question that's bugging him. When they don't, he growls and explodes, what the hell is mindfuck doing here? Language. Aizawa fixes his student with a stern look before answering. After Shinso's performance in the sports festival and Monetta's withdrawal from the class, it was only rational for me to consider him for the hero course. Dude. Congrats on getting in. Kirishima moves forward in an effort to wrap the boy in a celebratory hug. But Shinso sidesteps the attempt in order to dodge it effectively. Save it for after I've proven myself, he watches as Kirishima stumbles past him. Shinso's right, Aizawa nods, he's not been fully accepted just yet. The explanation that follows makes Kirishima pick himself up. Rather, while you're all away during internships, I'll be evaluating Shinso myself to see if he should be allowed in. That's still good news for you, Shinso, I have no doubt you'll manage. Izuku flashes the boy an encouraging smile which Kirishima and Jiro reciprocate with an additional thumbs up. Shinso looks away, thanks. I guess, his voice quiet as he shyly smiles softly. Wow, but an internship with Aizawa-sensei, I don't envy him. Jiro nudges Izuku as she whispers to him and the others within proximity. Kirishima winces before nodding while Izuku feels a twinge of sympathy as well. They jump when Aizawa raises his voice, quit chattering and pay attention to your surroundings. They think they're caught before realizing he only did so because of the rise in reverberation of screeching steel on steel. The train is arriving, he gestures with his head in the direction of the tunnel that's slowly turning from dark to dim. The wheels grinding the tracks stop their electrified spin. Everyone steps back, staying behind the yellow painted line until the train glides to a full stop. When the connected cars open each of the doors, the passengers swap from inside and outside. Immediately, seats are filled and spots are taken. Aizawa and Shinso go to the back of the car where they stand off to the side. Bakugo steals an open seat, simultaneously claiming the one next to him for Kirishima to sit. The redhead chuckles as he apologetically shrugs, sorry guys but ya snooze ya lose, leaving Jiro and Izuku to fend for themselves. The duo move to the other side of the car where one chair is available. Why you can have the seat if you want, Izuku offers it to Jiro with a sheepish step back. Oh, thanks, but it's fine, Jiro waves her hands while stammering, you take it. Ah, but I insist, Izuku frantically shakes his head while returning the gesture. Bakugo watches the exchange from the sidelines, rolling his eyes at their antics. He huffs before grumbling his suggestion, why don't you just have her sit in your lap? Izuku's eyes nearly pop out of their sockets. I'll stand, he blurts out an instant response despite his voice squeaking. Jiro would have probably reacted the same way had he not done so first. Rather, she pouts instead. You turned down Bakugo's suggestion a little hastily there, her arms fold across her chest as she fixes Izuku with a sassy stare, the thought of sharing with me really that bad? Izuku's head nearly flies off when it swivels to look at the girl in shock. What? No. He gets whiplash when he does it a second time. I mean, the boy searches the enclosed car for someone to save him as he begins to panic. Do you not like me? Am I not attractive enough for you? But Jiro's jacks raised menacingly with the aura an angry woman radiates makes everybody just as cowardice. Izuku stumbles over himself as much as he does his words, no. I mean, yes, I do. I find you very attractive, but finally finds his feeting when he lands on his answer. Izuku and Jiro both realize what he said and blush. All the tension in the air evaporates, both of them avoiding looking at the other. The moment stretches rather than passes. Eventually, Izuku forces himself to mumble, fine. You can sit on my lap. He sits down, still directing his gaze to be far off from Jiro. When the moment continues to elongate, he can't help himself, he looks sidelong to see if the girl will actually commit. Jiro covers her face, unable to hide her intense blush. Her cheeks are hot in her hands, nowhere close to cooling off. Nevertheless, she slowly lowers her back end to sit down. Izuku and her tense up when her ass makes contact with his lap. It doesn't help that they both nervously fidget, the movement below making them all the more aware of their touch. Bakugo grins, satisfied to watch their squirming. That is, until Kirishima nudges him. Smooth. But why didn't you use that same Riz technique on me? He leans in close until he invades the blonde's personal space. Bakugo drives a palm into Kirishima's face, giving the redhead a shove and driving him back. Shut the fuck up, shitty hair. He huffs and puffs as he restrains himself from showing too much emotion. I only helped the nerd out cause I owed him one for all the trouble I caused. Suddenly, the train's brake unlatches and the car shifts with a jolt. Jiro is jerked back, forcing Izuku to wrap his arms around her. Once he catches her in order to prevent her from falling, the train starts moving forward. It's then he realizes the position that they're in. Sorry. But Jiro grabs his arms before they can move away. She brings them back around her waist. Wrapped in a strange hug, they each continue to blush over their close proximity. But, Jiro speaks for them both when she says, it's fine. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.